The message came on a Tuesday morning when Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his coffee and watching the Earth rise over the lunar horizon. The transmission bore the official seal of the Galactic Coalition, that collection of alien races that had been making demands on humanity for the past 5 years. Jake read it twice before he fully understood what they were asking. Surrender all human colonies beyond the Sol system. Accept tributary status under coalition rule. Submit to regular inspections and resource quotas. The alternative was simple and brutal. Total annihilation of the human race. Jake set down his coffee cup and called his communications officer. "Tony, patch me through to Earth Command." Within an hour, every human leader on Earth and across the colonies had read the same message. The coalition had given humanity 30 days to respond. They would send their combined fleet to the neutral zone at Kepler Station to receive humanity's answer. Admiral Ryan Cooper stood in the war room beneath the Rocky Mountains, staring at the holographic display that showed the coalition's gathering forces. 200 crystalline ships from the Vex-High Empire hung in space like deadly jewels. 150 organic hive ships from the Krath Collective pulsed with bioluminescent weapons. Even the peaceful Aldari had contributed 75 of their advanced vessels to the cause. Over 500 ships, General Linda Hayes said, standing beside him, the largest fleet ever assembled in known space. And they want us to what, exactly? Cooper asked, though he already knew the answer. Roll over and die quietly, Hayes replied, or fight and die loudly. Cooper studied the display for a long moment. The coalition races had been the dominant powers in the galaxy for thousands of years. Their technology was proven, their military tactics refined through countless conflicts. Humanity had been spacefaring for less than a century. By every logical measure, this was an unwinnable fight. Send. Captain Morrison, Cooper said finally. Hayes turned to stare at him. Sir? One ship. The Liberty. Morrison and his crew. Admiral, with respect, that's suicide. Morrison's a good captain, but trust me, Linda. Send Morrison. 3 weeks later, Captain Jake Morrison sat in the command chair of the UES Liberty as his ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the neutral zone. Around him, his crew of 12 worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. Navigator Lisa Grant plotted their course to Kepler Station. Weapons Officer Danny White ran diagnostics on their modest armament. Chief Engineer Kate Bishop monitored the ship's systems with the intensity of a hawk watching prey. Captain, Tony Rivera called from the communication station. We're being hailed by the Coalition flagship. On screen. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of a massive Vex-High dreadnought. Admiral Zethkar stood at its center, his crystalline form refracting light in rainbow patterns. Behind him, Jake could see other alien figures. The insectoid bulk of Hive Queen Scrix and the robed form of Elder Thane of the Aldari. So, Zethkar said, his voice carrying the harmonics of crystal chimes, humanity sends one small vessel to face the might of the galaxy. How quaint. I'm Captain Morrison of the UES Liberty, Jake replied calmly. I'm here to discuss terms. Scrix's mandibles clicked with what Jake assumed was laughter. Terms? You bring 12 humans against our 500 ships and speak of terms? Elder Thane stepped forward, his ancient face showing something that might have been pity. Captain Morrison, surely your leaders understand the futility of resistance. We offer you the chance to surrender with dignity. I appreciate that, Jake said. However, I'd like to request a formal diplomatic meeting before we proceed. It's human custom. The 3 alien leaders exchanged glances. Zethkar's form brightened slightly. Very well. You and two of your officers may come aboard our flagship. We shall hear what humanity has to say for itself. The docking bay of the Coalition flagship was enormous, large enough to hold a dozen ships the size of the Liberty. Jake walked beside Commander Amy Parker, his diplomatic aide, while Kate Bishop followed a step behind. They had requested that Kate be allowed to bring her scanning equipment for safety protocols, a request the aliens had granted with obvious amusement. The meeting room was even more impressive than the docking bay. Representatives from dozens of species filled the chamber, each curious to see the humans who dared to face the Coalition with a single ship. Jake took his seat at the negotiating table, acutely aware that he was probably the most outgunned diplomat in galactic history. Now then, Admiral Zethkar began, settling into his crystalline chair. Let us hear humanity's response to our generous offer. Jake opened the datapad Amy handed him. Well, we've given this considerable thought, and we do have some questions about the terms. Questions? Hive Queen Scrix's compound eyes focused on him with predatory interest. Yes. For instance, Clause 7 mentions resource quotas. Could you elaborate on the specific minerals and materials you'll require? Zethkar's harmonics shifted to a more irritated frequency. The quotas will be determined by Coalition needs. I understand, but we'd like some preliminary figures for planning purposes. And Clause 12 mentions regular inspections. How regular are we talking about? Monthly? Yearly? Elder Thane leaned back in his chair. Captain Morrison, these details can be worked out after your surrender. Oh, I'm sure they can, Jake said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. But you understand, we need to present a complete package to our people. They're very thorough about paperwork. For the next 2 hours, Jake asked questions about everything from taxation rates to inspection procedures to the legal status of human children born under Coalition rule. The alien leaders grew increasingly frustrated as the human captain seemed determined to discuss every minor detail of their subjugation. Meanwhile, Kate Bishop worked quietly at her scanning station, her equipment humming softly as it analyzed. The ship's systems. To the aliens, it looked like routine safety protocols. They had no idea that Kate's scanners were actually sophisticated infiltration tools, mapping every network, every security protocol, every system vulnerability in the massive flagship. Captain Morrison, Zethkar finally said, his crystal form now pulsing with barely contained annoyance. Surely these minutiae can be addressed later. The essential question is simple. Does humanity surrender or not? Jake glanced at Kate, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. You know, Admiral, that's a fair point. I think we've covered most of the basics. He stood up and straightened, his uniform. I'll need to consult with my superiors, of course. Give me, say, 6 hours to transmit our questions back to Earth and receive new instructions. 6 hours, Elder Thane agreed. But no longer. Our patience has limits. As Jake and his officers returned to the Liberty, Amy whispered, Did Kate get what she needed? More than we hoped, Jake replied quietly. Much more. Back on the Liberty's bridge, Jake settled into his command chair and opened a secure channel to Earth. Admiral Cooper, this is Morrison. Package delivered. Kate got complete access. Cooper's voice crackled through the speakers. Understood. Jake, are you ready for the fireworks? Jake looked around his bridge at his crew of 12, then out at the 500 Coalition ships surrounding them. As ready as we'll ever be, sir. Then let's show them what one human ship can do. 4 hours after the diplomatic meeting, strange reports began filtering through the Coalition fleet. Commander Vash of the Vex-High cruiser Crystal Wind noticed it first when his navigation computer showed a .001-degree deviation in their position coordinates. Not enough to matter, barely enough to register, but his instruments were supposed to be perfect. 3 ships away, Captain Thrix of the Krath vessel Bone Dancer found herself dealing with minor communication static. During routine fleet updates, again, nothing serious, just tiny bursts of interference that lasted microseconds. Her biotechnicians assured her it was normal system fluctuation. On the Aldari destroyer Peaceful Current, Lieutenant Commander Yael reported that their shield generators were operating at 99.7% efficiency instead of the usual 100%. Engineering said they would look into it when they had time. It was hardly urgent. Admiral Zethkar dismissed these reports when they reached his flagship. Every fleet experienced minor technical issues. 500 ships operating in close proximity always created some interference. The fact that these problems were occurring across different technologies and different species meant nothing. Or so he told himself. Meanwhile, aboard the UES Liberty, Kate Bishop sat in the ship's tiny engineering section, her fingers dancing, across holographic displays that showed network maps of every Coalition vessel within 1,000 kilometers. Her safety scans from earlier had been far more than safety protocols. They had been sophisticated penetration programs designed to slip past alien security systems and establish backdoor access to critical ship functions. "How's it looking, Kate?" Captain Morrison asked, stepping into the cramped engineering bay. "Like Christmas morning?" Kate replied without taking her eyes off her screens. "Their security is good, but it's all designed to keep out their own technology. They never imagined someone might approach their systems from a completely different angle." She pulled up a schematic of the Coalition flagship. "See, the Vex-High use crystalline quantum networks. Beautiful technology, really elegant. But they assume any attack will come through quantum channels. They never thought to guard against old-fashioned electromagnetic infiltration." Morrison nodded. "And the others?" "The Krath use biological networks, living computers essentially. Amazing stuff. But biological systems follow biological rules, and I've got programs that can mimic their biosignatures perfectly. As for the Aldari, well, their systems are so advanced they've become predictable. When you build something perfect, you don't expect anyone to find the imperfections." Kate's fingers paused over her console. "Jake, I need you to understand something. What we're about to do, it's going to change everything. Once I activate these programs, there's no going back. The galaxy will know what humanity is capable of." Morrison looked out through the small porthole at the Coalition fleet surrounding them. Hundreds of ships, each one capable of destroying the Liberty with a single shot. "They already decided there's no going back when they demanded our surrender. Do it." Kate nodded and began entering activation codes. "Programs will go live in 90 minutes. That should give our people enough time to get into position." Across the fleet, the minor glitches became slightly more noticeable. Navigation computers on 17 ships now showed position errors. Communications suffered brief but regular static bursts. Shield efficiency dropped another 0.1% on 43 vessels. Power distribution fluctuated microseconds longer than normal on dozens more. Lieutenant Commander Zex of the Vex-High reported to his captain that their weapons targeting system had developed a tiny delay. Just a few milliseconds, probably nothing to worry about. Captain Score of the Krath vessel informed his Hive Queen that their biocannons were experiencing minor firing sequence variations, well within acceptable parameters. The Coalition's greatest strength had always been their confidence in their technology. For thousands of years, their weapons and defenses had proven superior to anything they encountered. They had grown comfortable, perhaps even complacent, in their technological dominance. They had never faced an enemy that turned their own technology against them. On Earth, Admiral Ryan Cooper stood in the command center watching displays that showed 50 human ships moving into position around the neutral zone. Unlike the massive Coalition vessels, these ships were small, fast, and completely invisible to every scanning technology the aliens possessed. "Stealth fields holding steady," reported Commander Alex Stone from the UES Vengeance. "Coalition sensors are looking right through us." "Understood," Cooper replied. "Maintain position and wait for Morrison's signal." The human stealth technology was not more advanced than Coalition systems. It was simply different. While alien races had spent millennia perfecting energy-based detection methods, humans had taken a different approach. Human stealth worked by creating false sensor readings, by feeding enemy scanners exactly what they expected to see: empty space. It was a magic trick on a galactic scale, and the Coalition had no idea they were the audience. Back on the Liberty, Commander Amy Parker reviewed the diplomatic files one more time. In 12 minutes, she and Captain Morrison would return to the Coalition flagship for the final negotiations. This time, they would not be asking questions about resource quotas or inspection schedules. "Nervous?" Morrison asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Terrified," Amy admitted. "When this starts, we'll be sitting right in the middle of their command ship with no way out." "Kate's programs will protect us," Morrison said. "And even if they don't, we're not really the important ones here. The important thing is showing them that humanity won't be bullied." Amy looked at him. "You really think this will work?" Morrison smiled. "Amy, 3 years ago, Coalition First Contact teams visited Earth and told our leaders that humanity was a minor species that should feel grateful for any attention from the galactic community. They suggested we might be useful as laborers or entertainers. They never considered that we might be dangerous." He stood up and straightened his uniform. "Today, they find out what happens when you underestimate the species that split the atom, walked on their moon, and built artificial intelligence before they even knew aliens existed." The final hour passed quickly. Reports continued to filter in from across the Coalition fleet about minor technical difficulties, but Admiral Zethkar had more important things to worry about. The humans had had their 6 hours to consult with Earth. Now it was time for their final answer. As Morrison and Parker prepared to leave the Liberty for the last time, Kate Bishop made final adjustments to her programs. In 30 minutes, every piece of infiltration software she had planted would activate simultaneously. The Coalition's own ships would become weapons pointed at their own fleet. "Captain," she called as Morrison reached the airlock. "When you give the signal, make sure you're sitting down. This is going to be quite a ride." Morrison paused at the threshold. "Kate, will this really end the war?" "No," Kate said quietly. "This will prevent the war from ever starting. There's a difference." As the shuttle carrying Morrison and Parker crossed the space between the Liberty and the Coalition flagship, neither the pilot nor the passengers mentioned the fact that 49 additional human ships had silently moved into attack positions around the alien fleet. In 15 minutes, the largest naval battle in galactic history would begin. The aliens still thought they were facing one small human ship with 12 crew members. They were about to learn why that was enough. Captain Morrison and Commander Parker walked into the Coalition flagship's conference room for the second time that day, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Where before there had been casual arrogance, now there was expectant tension. 500 ships waited for humanity's final answer. Admiral Zethkar's crystalline form pulsed with anticipation as Morrison took his seat. Captain Morrison, I trust your consultation with Earth was productive. What is humanity's decision? Morrison opened his datapad and looked around the room at the assembled alien leaders. Hive Queen Scrix's compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights like black mirrors. Elder Thane sat perfectly still, his ancient hands folded on the table. Representatives from dozens of other species watched from the gallery, eager to witness humanity's surrender. Well, Morrison began, we've given your offer considerable thought, and I'm afraid we have to decline. The silence in the room lasted exactly 3 seconds before it erupted into chaos. Alien voices rose in anger, disbelief, and what Morrison could only describe as confused outrage. How dare these primitive humans reject the Coalition's generous terms? Zethkar's form blazed with angry light. Captain Morrison, I fear you misunderstand your situation. You have 1 ship. We have 500. Your refusal means the complete destruction of your species. I understand perfectly, Morrison replied calmly. However, there seems to be a misunderstanding about our situation. He touched a control on his datapad. Tony, now would be good. Back. On the Liberty, Communications Officer Tony Rivera opened a channel that connected to every ship in the Coalition fleet. His voice echoed through 500 vessels simultaneously. Attention, Coalition forces. This is the UES Liberty. You wanted to see what one human ship could do. You're about to find out. At that exact moment, Kate Bishop activated every piece of infiltration software she had planted in the Coalition fleet. The effect was immediate and devastating. On the Vex-High cruiser Crystal Wind, Commander Vash watched in horror as his weapon systems locked him out. His navigation computer began plotting random course changes. His shields flickered and died. All around him, his crew called out reports of total system failure. Captain Thrix of the Krath vessel Bone Dancer found herself trapped on her own bridge as security doors sealed shut. Her bio-cannons turned to aim at other Krath ships. Her communication systems broadcast nothing but static. Even the ship's life support responded only to commands from an unknown external source. Lieutenant Commander Yael of the Aldari destroyer reported that every system on his ship now displayed the same message in perfect Aldari script. Courtesy of Earth Engineering Corps. Across the entire Coalition fleet, the same scene played out on ship after ship. Weapon systems refused to function. Engines would not start. Navigation computers showed false readings. Communication arrays transmitted only interference. Even basic life support operated at the discretion of human-controlled programs. The Coalition's mighty armada had become a collection of floating metal, crystal, and bone, as helpless as children's toys. But that was only the beginning. In the space around the neutral zone, 50 human ships simultaneously dropped their stealth fields. The UES Vengeance, UES Thunder, UES Retribution, and 47 others appeared from nowhere, their weapons already trained on Coalition targets. Commander Rick Stone of the Vengeance opened a channel to the Coalition flagship. Admiral Zethkar, this is Commander Stone of the United Earth Navy. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender immediately or face the consequences. In the conference room, the alien leaders stared at their displays in shock. Where moments before they had seen empty space, now they saw human warships bristling with weapons. Elder Thane's ancient face had gone pale. Hive Queen Scrix's mandibles clicked rapidly in what Morrison recognized as panic. "Impossible," Zethkar whispered, his crystalline form flickering between colors. "Our sensors showed nothing." "How long? Have you been there?" "Long enough," Morrison replied. "The question now is what happens next. My people are prepared to demonstrate exactly why you should never threaten humanity's children." Admiral Zethkar attempted to contact his fleet, but his communication systems responded with nothing but static. He tried to activate the flagships, weapons, but the controls remained locked. Even his attempt to sound a general alarm failed as the ship's systems ignored his commands. "What have you done to our ships?" he demanded. Morrison stood up slowly. "We've shown you the difference between advanced technology and innovative technology. Your systems are more sophisticated than ours, but sophistication isn't the same as security. You built your networks to defend against enemies who think like you do. We don't think like you do." Commander Parker activated her own data pad, bringing up tactical displays on the room's screens. Every coalition ship appeared in red, marked as compromised. Every human ship showed green, weapons ready and targeting systems locked. "Your crystalline quantum networks are beautiful," Morrison continued, "but they're also predictable. Your biological computers are amazing, but biology follows rules. Your perfect Aldari systems are indeed perfect, which makes them easy to understand and exploit." Hive Queen Scrix tried to rise from her chair, but her legs trembled with the shock of complete defeat. You planned this from the beginning. We planned this from the day you first told us we were an inferior species," Morrison confirmed. "Did you really think we would just accept that judgment? Humans have never been good at accepting other people's opinions about our limitations." The conference room's main display activated, showing a real-time view of the space around them. Coalition ships drifted helplessly while human vessels maintained perfect formation. On ship after ship, alien crews found themselves locked out of their own systems, reduced to passengers on vessels they could no longer control. Elder Thane spoke for the first time since the demonstration began. "How many of our ships retain function?" "None," Morrison replied simply. "Every vessel in your fleet is currently under human control. We can restore your systems at any time, or we can leave you drifting here until your life support fails. The choice is yours." Through the conference room's windows, they could see the coalition flagship's own weapons turning to target other ships in the fleet. The great dreadnought that had been the symbol of coalition power was now just another piece in humanity's chess game. "What do you want?" Zethkar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Morrison smiled, and for the first time since arriving at the neutral zone, it was a genuine expression. "What we want is very simple, Admiral. We want you to leave human space alone. We want you to stop making demands about our colonies, and we want you to remember this day every time you consider whether humanity deserves respect." Captain Julie Brooks of the UES Thunder reported over the communication channel. "All coalition vessels secured, Captain Morrison. No resistance encountered. They're completely helpless." "Understood, Commander Brooks. Maintain positions, but do not fire unless fired upon." Morrison turned back to the alien leaders. "Gentlemen, ladies, and distinguished beings of various classifications, let me make this perfectly clear. Today you learned what one human ship can do. You've seen 50 human ships appear from nowhere. What you haven't seen is the rest of our fleet." He touched his data pad again, and new contacts appeared on the tactical display. Hundreds of human ships decloaked across the star system, surrounding not just the Coalition fleet but the entire region. "We didn't send one ship because we're weak," Morrison said quietly. "We sent one ship because one ship was all we needed. The rest were just insurance." The galaxy had asked why humanity sent one ship to face 500. Now they had their answer. It was because one ship was enough. The first shot came from the Krath heavy cruiser Flesh Render, whose desperate captain managed to override Kate Bishop's control programs for exactly 2.3 seconds. It was enough time to fire one plasma burst at the human destroyer, HFY Storm, before the ship's systems locked down again. The plasma bolt struck the Storm's forward shields and simply vanished, absorbed by defensive systems that the Coalition had never seen before. Captain Lisa Ross of the Storm didn't even bother to return fire. Her weapons officer, Lieutenant Danny Cruz, simply reported, "No damage, Captain. Their plasma can't penetrate our adaptive barriers, but the shot had been fired, and that changed everything." Commander Rick Stone of the UES Vengeance opened fleet communications. "All ships, we have hostile fire from Coalition forces. Rules of engagement are now active. Show them what happens when you shoot at humans." What followed was not a battle. It was a demonstration. The Coalition had spent thousands of years perfecting their military technology. Their weapons could crack planets. Their shields could withstand the heat of stars. Their armor was forged from materials that existed nowhere in nature. By every measure they understood, they should have been invincible. They had never faced an enemy that changed the rules while the fight was happening. The UES Thunder under Captain Julie Brooks fired the opening salvo. Her main guns launched, projectiles that shifted their composition mid-flight, adapting to whatever defenses they encountered. The Vex-High cruiser Crystal Blade tried to deflect them with energy shields, but the projectiles simply changed frequency to pass through harmlessly before exploding inside the ship's hull. Captain Danny Moore of the UES Lightning demonstrated human point defense systems by intercepting every missile the Krath fired before they traveled 50 meters. His weapons didn't just destroy the incoming projectiles, they analyzed them, learned their weaknesses, and then transmitted that information to every human ship in the fleet. The Aldari destroyer Wise Current attempted to use their famous phase shift technology to become temporarily incorporeal, but Lieutenant Commander Sam Wilson of the UES Rapids had anticipated that move. His ship fired temporal displacement rounds that existed in multiple phases simultaneously, striking the Aldari vessel even while it was phased. But the most devastating moment came when the Coalition flagship attempted to use its ultimate weapon. Admiral Zethkar managed to briefly override Kate's programs through sheer crystalline will, bringing online the Stellar Lance, a weapon capable of destroying moons. The beam lanced out from the flagship toward the UES Liberty, the small ship that had started this entire confrontation. Every human and alien in the battle held their breath as the most powerful weapon in the Coalition arsenal struck the vessel that held only 12 crew members. The Liberty's shields didn't just absorb the blast, they redirected it. The Stellar Lance's energy bounced off the Liberty's defensive grid and struck 3 Coalition ships simultaneously, crippling them instantly. Captain Morrison's voice echoed across every channel in the battle zone. "Thank you for the power boost, Admiral. Our batteries were running a bit low." It was impossible. Energy weapons didn't work that way. You couldn't just redirect a stellar lance like light off a mirror. But the humans had done it anyway, because human engineering didn't always follow the laws that other species considered absolute. The psychological effect on the coalition forces was immediate and complete. Their ultimate weapon had not only failed to destroy a single small human ship, it had been turned against their own fleet. If they couldn't defeat 12 humans with their most powerful technology, what hope did they have against 50 human warships? Panic spread through the alien fleet like wildfire. Ship after ship attempted to surrender, but their communication systems remained under human control. Coalition crews found themselves trapped on their own vessels, unable to fight, unable to flee, unable even to call for mercy. Captain Amy Walsh of the UES Fury intercepted a group of Krath fighters that had broken free from the main battle. Instead of destroying them, she demonstrated human cyber warfare capabilities by taking control of their biomechanical systems and forcing them to fire on each other. Within minutes, the entire fighter squadron had been eliminated without the Fury firing a shot. The Vexhai attempted to coordinate a mass assault using their quantum-linked communication network, but Kate Bishop had anticipated that strategy hours earlier. Her infiltration programs didn't just block their communications. They fed false orders through the quantum links, causing coalition ships to target each other instead of human vessels. Commander Tony Lopez of the UES Hammer showed the aliens what human weapons could do when they stopped holding back. His ship's main gun fired a single round that passed through 4 coalition vessels in sequence, each impact perfectly calibrated to disable rather than destroy. The round's final target was an asteroid 3,000 kilometers away, which it obliterated completely, just to make the point that the previous shots had been carefully measured for effect. But perhaps the most terrifying demonstration came from Captain Kevin Hart of the UES Tempest. When a formation of Aldari ships attempted to retreat, Hart's vessel simply disappeared from all sensors for 30 seconds. When it reappeared, it was sitting directly in the middle of the Aldari formation, having somehow bypassed every known law of physics to instantaneously travel several thousand kilometers. The Tempest fired a single burst in all directions simultaneously, disabling every ship around it before vanishing again. It reappeared back in its original position as if nothing had happened. How? Elder Thane whispered from the conference room of the Coalition flagship, watching his people's ships fall one by one to impossible human technology. Morrison checked his watch. 12 minutes. That's how long it took 50 human ships to neutralize a fleet of 500 Coalition vessels. I think that might be a record. Admiral Zethkar's crystalline form had dimmed to barely visible levels. Your technology, it's impossible. Energy doesn't behave that way. Matter cannot teleport. Weapons cannot adapt their properties in flight. You're right, Morrison agreed. According to your understanding of physics, none of this should be possible. But you see, Admiral, that's the difference between us. You discovered the laws of the universe and learned to work within them. We discovered the laws of the universe and immediately started looking for loopholes. The battle, if it could even be called that, was over. The mighty Coalition armada drifted in space, every ship disabled, every crew helpless. Human vessels moved among them like sharks among minnows, their weapons trained on any vessel that so much as powered up a communication array. From the UES Vengeance, Commander Stone reported to Morrison. All Coalition vessels secured, Captain. No functional weapons detected, no communication capability, no engine power. They're completely at our mercy. Morrison nodded. Very good, Commander. Now comes the interesting part. In the conference room, Hive Queen Scrix finally managed to speak. What? What do you intend to do with us? Morrison smiled that same cold smile he had worn throughout the negotiations. That depends entirely on how quickly you learn to listen. The greatest fleet ever assembled in galactic history had been reduced to floating debris in less than 15 minutes. The Coalition's technological superiority had proven worthless against human innovation and cunning, and they were about to learn that the demonstration was far from over. The silence in the Coalition flagship's conference room stretched for nearly a full minute before Admiral Zethkar finally spoke. His crystalline form had dimmed so much he was barely visible, and his harmonic voice carried frequencies of defeat that Morrison had never heard before. "What are your terms?" the Vex High Admiral asked. Morrison remained seated, his hands folded calmly on the table. Around him, the most powerful military leaders in the galaxy waited for his response, like children waiting for punishment. Through the conference room's windows, they could see the wreckage of their mighty fleet drifting helplessly in space. "My terms are simple," Morrison said. "First, the Coalition will immediately withdraw all claims to human territory. Our colonies remain ours, now and forever." Elder Thane nodded slowly. "Agreed." "Second, no Coalition vessel will enter human space without explicit permission from Earth Command. Any unauthorized entry will be considered an act of war." Hive Queen Scrix's mandibles clicked nervously. "And if we require passage through your territory for legitimate trade?" "You asked nicely," Morrison replied. "We're not unreasonable. We just want to be asked instead of told." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the disabled fleet. "Third, the Coalition will establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity, not as a tributary species, not as a client state, but as equals." Admiral Zethkar's form flickered with what Morrison had learned to recognize as confusion. "Equals? But your technology? How did you develop such capabilities in less than a century?" Morrison turned back to face the assembled aliens. "That's actually an interesting story. Would you like to hear it?" When no one objected, Morrison activated his datapad, bringing up historical records on the room's displays. Images of Earth flashed across the screens. Cities, factories, laboratories, and most prominently, scenes of conflict. "You see, Admiral, every species in the Coalition achieved spaceflight through gradual technological advancement. You had time to develop philosophy, art, culture. You built beautiful civilizations and then expanded them to the stars." The display showed human history, wars, revolutions, disasters, and desperate innovation born from necessity. Humanity took a different path. "We've been trying to kill each other for our entire recorded history. Every generation faced extinction from war, plague, natural disaster, or our own stupidity. We didn't have the luxury of gradual development. Images of human weapons flashed on the screen: swords, cannons, aircraft, nuclear weapons, and finally, the sleek vessels of the current fleet. We split the atom because we needed a bigger bomb. We reached space because we needed better missiles. We developed computer networks because we needed better ways to coordinate our wars. Every advancement came from our desperate need to survive whatever was trying to destroy us." Commander Parker activated another set of files. "When we finally achieved interstellar travel, we immediately began preparing for the next threat, which, as it turned out, was you." Elder Thane leaned forward. "You've been preparing for this confrontation since first contact?" "Since before first contact," Morrison confirmed. "Our deep space monitoring stations detected Coalition ships 3 years before your official first contact mission. We knew you were coming, and we knew you saw us as primitives. The display changed to show construction facilities hidden throughout the outer solar system. Massive shipyards, research installations, and weapons testing facilities that had been built in complete secrecy. While your diplomats were explaining how honored we should feel to receive your attention, our engineers were reverse engineering every piece of technology you shared with us. While your cultural exchange teams were teaching us about galactic civilization, our military was developing countermeasures for every weapon system in your databases. Morrison touched another control, and the display showed Kate Bishop's infiltration program spreading through coalition networks like digital viruses. You made one critical error in your assessment of humanity. You assumed that because we were technologically inferior, we were intellectually inferior. You shared your knowledge freely because you couldn't imagine we might use it against you. Admiral Zethkar's form brightened slightly with what Morrison interpreted as bitter amusement. So the student surpassed the teacher? No, Morrison said, firmly. The student became something the teacher never imagined possible. You gave us the foundation, but we built something completely different on top of it. Hive Queen Scrix spoke for the first time in several minutes. Your weapons. They violate known physics. They violate your understanding of physics, Morrison corrected. When you've spent centuries perfecting energy weapons, you don't expect someone to develop projectiles that change their properties in flight. When you build quantum communication networks, you don't anticipate analog infiltration techniques. When you create perfect defense systems, you don't plan for weapons that rewrite the rules of engagement in real time. The door to the conference room opened, and Kate Bishop entered carrying a portable computer terminal. She had been monitoring the conversation from the Liberty and had requested permission to join the final negotiations. "If I may," Kate said, setting up her equipment, "I'd like to show you something." The room's displays changed to show a real-time view of Coalition fleet systems. Every ship appeared on the screen with detailed readouts of their current status. Right. Now, every vessel in your fleet is under complete human control. Your weapons, engines, life support, communications, even your coffee makers respond only to our commands. We could turn your fleet against any target in the galaxy, or we could simply turn off your life support and let you suffocate. She touched a control, and the life support readings on 50 Coalition ships dropped to critical levels before immediately returning to normal. But we're not going to do that. In exactly 1 hour, I'm going to restore control of your ships to you. Your weapons will work, your engines will start, and your communication systems will function normally. Elder Thane looked suspicious. "Why would you do that?" Kate smiled. "Because keeping control of your fleet would be declaring ourselves the rulers of the galaxy, and we don't want that job. We just want you to leave us alone." She activated another display showing the infiltration programs themselves. "However, I want you to understand what just happened here. These programs are now permanently embedded in your systems. We can reactivate them at any time from any distance whenever we choose." Admiral Zethkar studied the complex code flowing across the screens. "Dormant viruses in our networks. Think of them as insurance policies," Kate replied. "As long as the Coalition honors the peace agreement, they remain inactive. But if you ever threaten humanity again—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Every alien in the room understood the implications. Morrison returned to his seat at the negotiating table. "Now then, shall we discuss the details of our new relationship?" Over the next 2 hours, they worked out the framework for permanent peace between humanity and the Coalition. Trade agreements, territorial boundaries, diplomatic protocols, and most importantly, mutual defense pacts that would make any future conflict impossible. As the negotiations concluded, Admiral Zethkar asked the question that had been troubling him since the battle ended. "Captain Morrison, why did humanity really send only one ship? With this technology, you could have demanded our surrender from the beginning." Morrison stood up and straightened his uniform one final time. "Because, Admiral, sending one ship sent a message. It said that we were confident enough in our abilities to face your entire fleet with 12 people. It said that we didn't fear you." He walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. "But most importantly, it said that when humanity makes a promise, we keep it. We promise to respond to your ultimatum. We never promised to bring our entire fleet." As Morrison and his officers prepared to leave the Coalition flagship, Commander Stone's voice came over the communication system. "Captain Morrison, Earth Command is requesting an immediate debrief. Admiral Cooper wants to know how the negotiations went." Morrison activated his communicator. "Tell the Admiral that humanity just became an equal member of the galactic community. And Rick, tell him the Liberty is coming home." 3 months later, the UES Liberty docked at Earth's orbital station to a hero's welcome. Captain Morrison and his crew of 12 had faced down the largest fleet in galactic history and won without firing a shot. The galaxy had questioned why humanity sent one ship. Now they knew the answer. Sometimes one ship is enough when it carries the right people with the right plan and the absolute determination to protect their home. The galaxy had learned not to underestimate humanity. They would not make that mistake again. The stars belonged to everyone now, but Earth belonged to the humans, and anyone who forgot that fact would face the same fate as the Coalition fleet that dared to demand humanity's surrender. The Liberty had shown them what one human ship could do. The galaxy would remember.